Welcome to the Strive Seek Find podcast with me, Tom Heaton. As we start the new year, I thought I would begin with a short reflection about health. Indeed, this is more the framing of a question that I think will form a foundation for a lot of my writing over the next year. The idea for this post actually started germination a few years ago. As everyone will be aware, it's been a challenging time for healthcare. The COVID pandemic has ripped around the world, leaving a heavy mark on our societies, even now the worst of it is over. From my own viewpoint on intensive care, it was a brutal experience for the staff, as well as the devastation it wrought on patients and their families. I was fortunate enough that none of my closest got critically ill with the disease, so my experience was professional rather than personal. But in intensive care, we were looking after those worst affected by the disease. This usually meant extreme respiratory failure, often to the point of needing to be anaesthetised and put on a ventilator, and frequently with other organ systems failing as well. In short, the outcomes were often grim. Especially early on in the pandemic, before treatment strategies had been understood, getting sick enough to require intensive care was a bad sign, and not just for survival, but also for how things looked if you didn't survive. It is a great misconception about critical illness that, assuming you do survive, it is something that you simply get better from. Nietzsche had clearly spent little time in an intensive care unit when he quipped, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Those that got through the illnesses we saw often bore the physical and mental scars of what they had been through. Bodies were left irrevocably changed, minds devastated. And this is where I really started to ask why. Why had these people in our care got so sick that they ended up at death's door or passing through it? Why was the same virus ravaging the lungs of some, whilst many others threw it off as if it was a mere cold? This was a question about COVID that many asked, but for me, it was an observation that made the question applicable to the entirety of critical illness. Some people can receive a significant physiological insult, such as a major operation, and bounce back from it easily. In contrast, many others' bodies responded badly, landing them in our care, and often unable to recover from what they had been through. We learnt about many of these through our training, with the obvious factors such as age, frailty, and existing medical conditions being major obstacles to getting better from negative events. But there often seemed more. Indeed, many of our risk tools had a much greater focus on the acute physiological derangement. That is, they were predicting how badly things were going, as opposed to using a lot of past knowledge to look into the future. This is understandable, given the complexity and heterogeneous nature of medical pathology, but also meant that there seemed to be a few proactive lessons that we could preach. If somebody asked me how they could avoid getting critically ill, my answer would actually be a little bit hard to formulate. It could range from the very unhelpful, just don't get sick, and have the right genes, through to the unhelpfully impractical, keep yourself in excellent physical health. The unhelpfulness seems to arise from the double challenge of critical illness being influenced by plain bad luck and by the daily care we take of our bodies. Are most people really in the position to do much about these things? Yes, people can change many things in their lives, but there seems like an equilibrium that will be difficult to move. Through my medical training, I have seen how difficult it is for people to change even the things that are really bad for their health. As such, I've been left sceptical that people are able to simply change major components of their life without significant reasons, and targeting environmental and psychological engineering alongside. However, reading Outlive by Peter Attia has given me an interesting new perspective on these thoughts. Attia gives an excellent narrative around the concepts of Medicine 2.0 and 3.0. Medicine 2.0 is our current healthcare system and is primarily reactive in its nature. In many ways, intensive care is peak Medicine 2.0, resource-intensive and highly specialised care that does a great job of combating acute and severe problems. This approach has been brilliant at combating the old scourges of our health, the infectious diseases, the major trauma, the acute surgical pathology. Our lives are longer and better than they were before we had this approach. However, we seem to now be at a point of diminishing returns. I have no doubt there will continue to be further incredible breakthroughs, especially as our genetic medicine and immunotherapy knowledge increases. But we seem to be continuing to struggle with the new health challenges, those of chronicity, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, and cancer are all still major causes of morbidity and mortality in our societies. The statins, metformin and beta blockers in our arsenal are genuinely effective, but on a scale that is too little and too late. We often treat in the very late stages of disease, even with preventative medicine. Medicine 3.0 is what Attia envisions as the necessary answer to this, starting the preventative care much earlier and much stronger. This struck me as the answer that applies to many of the problems that I see in intensive care. Attia himself has articulated his challenge as the centenarian Olympics, facing the inevitable physical decline that is linked with ageing, but with a strategy to combat it. In his mind, this is about appropriately training and caring for the body so that it's able to resist the ongoing demands that it faces and still perform as we would like it to. The parallel would seem to be the critical illness Olympics. The only way you can fare better when faced by critical illness is to prepare for it, and maybe be a bit lucky. So the question that I teased at the start of the post can probably be formatted as something like this: how can we prepare to face critical illness? As noted, it is something that I've already observed in my practice and has a place in common medical talk. To exemplify this, a long-standing joke is about how abnormal the physiology of farmers is. For whatever reason, one infers from the physicality of their jobs, they are viewed as having an immense resilience to pathology that would otherwise lay low a standard mortal. A farmer who has ended up coming to hospital, and God forbid he actually brought himself in, must be very sick. But alongside these humorous stories are hints of real effects. An example is some of the apparent immune effects seen in ice divers, who may get benefits against infections from the stress training that they put their bodies through with the extreme stress of their swimming. Less dramatically than this, we well know that those with better cardiorespiratory fitness, as per maximum oxygen delivery and anaerobic threshold, do better following major surgery. Assessing these values on an exercise bike is now a way that we can risk stratify certain patients for a number of physiological challenges. My idea is therefore to articulate the knowledge that we do have and explore the frontiers where the answers are still more hypotheses. My early impression is that many of the answers of relevance will relate to the embracing of the underpinning principles of Medicine 3.0. What is good for our health chronically will also stand us in good stead for acute challenges. But I also wonder if there is more. I have already alluded to some research on the effects of acute stress on our physical resilience, and this question has been a driver for a search for a wide number of magic bullets. Drugs from vitamin C through to steroids have been touted as being potential answers for some of the worst illnesses, with none yet living up to miracle status. Instead, the answer, if there is one, seems like to be more on the lines of Attia's Medicine 3.0. If we are physically fitter, if we are nutritionally healthier, we will do better. It will take doing many simple things for a very long time. The problem is that this is not very exciting, hard to research, and most importantly, often hard to implement. However, at least understanding the roadmap seems a necessary starting point, no matter how difficult the path is. Thank you for listening. To keep up to date and to follow my writings, subscribe to me on Substack, which is striveseekfind.substack.com, or follow me on X at @2striveseekfind.